thing. And you know, the space thing is actually overlapping quite a lot the dual use idea. So we are in the middle of that mess, and it's going to be a year or two until this sorts itself out, I guess. But Nicholas knows everything.
About dual use, yeah, and what you call a mess, the rest of us call delicious, interesting, a cool problem to solve. Yeah, my name's Nick, and yeah, 2 months ago when Magnus called me up, what I knew about space was pretty much that I could count backwards from 10. And, you know, and then Magnus said, no, he said, you know, dual use angle. And we had a talk, and all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do actually know a fair bit about this. All right, so two things I'd like to put out there. One is Ukraine, and that is that is saying you're either in Ukraine or you're not in innovation. And there's a reason for that, and that's the bit that I'd like to talk with those of you that are out there about, and that my work group really sort of got into. There's the call to action is that I'd love you to go to Ukraine. That people that are, if you've been down there and you've seen how they build products and how they innovate, you get it. Because until you've seen it, it's really, really hard to believe. And so, I'm up here because last year I ran Europe's first dual-use accelerator, startup accelerator. And that was a lot of work because I had to explain what dual use was to 9 out of 10 people I called, maybe 19 out of 20. Everybody said, what exactly is dual use? And I'd go through my song and dance about how it's some technology that both has a civil and a military application. But the big thing that I was trying to explain to them, the big example I was giving them was the Americans. We've all heard of DARPA and the Department of Defense and how they fund an awful lot of research. And the reason that they fund a lot of research is that they have the extreme use cases. And if we take those extreme use cases and we combine that with what I started out talking about, which was Ukraine, we start to see the overlap. All right. And you know, with these extreme use cases, those are the, you know, how many of us have, you know, we've all seen AR and VR, but put your hand up if you've ever worked with it on a day-to-day basis. Right? Yeah, you know, okay, if you've been a fighter pilot, maybe, or if you've flown an Apache attack helicopter, but yeah, it's an extreme use case, all right? Yeah, the internet, we've all worked with that, you know, but how many of us worked with the internet before 1985? All right, so, exactly, there's a couple of hands going up, which is why you're in this room, okay? Cool, but these edge use cases, there's a reason why the Department of Defense, you know, the military is often the people that fund this. And so what we were trying to get in this program that I was running was we were trying to get people out of the woods, you know, hey, you've got this thing that's really cool and it's unusual, and getting civilian buyers to buy it is going to be difficult, but military buyers will probably move first. Right, and that led me down to a little place called Ukraine. Right, and I thought 2 months ago, when we started talking about this, 2 months ago I'd been to Ukraine, and I'd been working with them a bunch, but I'd finally gotten there, and so I thought that was what we were going to be talking about. And then a whole bunch of news happened. And we all know the news that has happened, but then this new thing called autonomy came along, and 2 months if we've been talking about autonomy, it was whether or not you could let drones fly there by themselves and robots drive by themselves, but now we're talking about sovereign autonomy and Nordic space autonomy, and all of a sudden this becomes even more relevant because the political support, impetus, and perhaps most importantly, money is there for us to make this happen. So back to Ukraine and how that connects to this. All right, so there's this saying many of you may have heard that the Ukrainians build hardware at the speed of software. Right? And I've heard it, got it, yeah, and then I see it, wow. And until you see them developing stuff, putting it in a box, putting that box in a van and driving off, you don't quite get it. And I could tell you a bunch of stories about seeing teams building products and talking to them, and none of them have had anything to do with defense before the 24th of February 3 years ago, right? They all came from completely different backgrounds. And you know, the old line about, is it a feature, is it a bug? I don't know. There's a super interesting conversation to have about, you know, maybe they're able to do this because they didn't come from a defense industry background. But those of us that work with the defense industry are used to a very strict pyramid, the Department of Defense at the top, the primes, the this, the that. And then you go to Ukraine, and it is a bunch of anarchists. You know, Förenings Denmark we talk about, I know Förenings Sweden, well, you know, it's like if the Gardeners Association here in Kista decided, you know what, we could put together a drone, and my cousin really needs a drone, and you know, my uncle has a chocolate factory and they make a lot of money, they'd be willing to pay for the drones. You can't even get, that is a simplification of how things are running down there. Right? There are 200 drone manufacturers down there, not 200 drone projects. There are 200 companies making drones that are currently being deployed, flying around today, right now, somewhere in Ukraine. 200 different drones. And you say, well, how do they coordinate that? And the answer is they don't, you know. You and me were trying to get our drone to do something over there, and your electronic warfare jamming is, fuck, just turned off our drone. Hey, what are you doing? The coordinate, the disintegrate, you have to see it to understand it. And this is part of this hardware at the speed of software. It's, if you've ever worked with the games industry, one of the cool things about the game industry is even the back-end developers have a really strong opinion about gameplay and what's happening on the screen. It's one of the few industries where you'll see everybody have a really, really strong focus on. And you see that in Ukraine with drone company, with their manufacturers, right? Is everybody, including the dude that sweeps up after everybody's done, is super focused on producing the best products. And why and how it is, you know, it's beyond just really caring about what this product does and knowing the people that are at the front. So there's a key thing with this, which is the extreme use cases. And then combine that with, they also have direct contact with the users, right? It is not a triangular structure like this. It is a hyper flat structure. And again, I keep coming back. You have to go there to see it, almost to understand it. But it is super flat. It is the people that are developing something are talking to people that are flying it. So, you know, if you dream of getting product feedback, yeah, you are watching on your phone or on your laptop somebody using the thing that you sent to them this morning, right now in a life or death situation. It is mind expanding. So while people in innovation and in new products, we often talk about the new products, there is an awful lot of pushback that it's not so much the product, it's the innovation. It's the process innovation that this is the interesting part. It is not the individual drone, the individual robot, the individual maritime things flying around, yada yada, whatever. It's not the thing, it's the way. It's the way that they are managing this process of sending a completely new piece of hardware every 6 to 8 weeks out the door. And that the thing they were making 6 to 8 weeks ago, they can take apart for parts, but they can't ship it. You know? And you know, how many people in this room have ever made hardware at that speed? I don't think anybody's done it. So the question is, you know, cool, how do we? This presents some really super interesting potential in, if we go back to this Nordic space autonomy, which is, you know, something that they might talk about at Davos or in Brussels. It sounds cool, but what exactly does that mean at our level? Well, that matters because we're the people that have to make it happen. Yeah, we're the people that have to present a plan, a budget, say, you know, dear Madam Minister of Finance and Defense, you know, I need to write a check and it needs to have this many zeros and it needs to be in euros. Do we skip a generation? Do we? And the conversation I'd like to have today and going forward is, you know, perhaps the conversation is about defining products. It's about what is our method. And if it was products, that'd be an easier conversation to have because you'd say, ka-ching, here's the number. You know, you find the money. Here we've got to even more difficult, we've got to just say, like, I need you to open your, give me the credit card. And I'll be back with something cool, I promise. You know, yeah, so this, so it's this implementation thing. Also some big ones about, you know, most of the big companies in this are American companies. Yeah, okay, cool. So what do we do now? You know, what are the small and mid-sized European companies that are going to be big companies? This is an experiment. How do we run this experiment? How do we organize this experiment? How do we measure this experiment? The number one thing is this is going to be a lot of fun. It'll be super, super interesting. This may be something that we tell our grandchildren about. Thank you.
Great, Nick. Thank you so much. Very, very